Do you remember how you were taught to outline in school? It was to create a orderly organization of thoughts, right? Well, Mark isn't like that. A lot of scholars have tried to come up with an outline of Mark, and they're all different. So that tells me that Mark doesn't have an outline, really. I think he tells stories with a theme that runs through his book. In fact, there's more than one theme and probably many symbols as well. Well, that's certainly true of the theme we're going to look at today. We'll see how opposition to Jesus builds. We'll see people's reactions to the new thing that God is doing in the world. This new thing breaks through our categories and the boundaries we try to put on God. He breaks through them, and not everybody is happy about it. Okay, so we need to remember that this book of Mark's includes summaries of what's been going on, and our text for today is one of those summaries. But it ends in an ominous note that is according to the theme that Mark is using. So let's read today's text. Maybe you'll see what I mean. It's Mark 6:53 to 71. After they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and anchored there. And as they were getting out of the boat, people recognized him immediately. They ran about through that whole region and began to carry around those who were sick on stretchers, wherever they heard that Jesus was. And wherever he would go, into villages or into towns or to farms, they would put those who were sick in the marketplaces and would implore him that if they could even touch the edge of his cloak. And all those who touched it were healed. And the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered to him. And we'll stop there for today. Did you notice something weird in there? The people had faith in his clothes. Yeah, that's weird. What is up with that? I don't know. Okay, so Mark is showing us the popularity of Jesus is growing. His demonstrations of power and authority are becoming more astonishing and more public. So, Mark's opposition theme is growing out of a root of power in Jerusalem and in Rome as they hear about this going on down in Galilee. So, to see that root, we need to back up. We need to start at the beginning of Mark's opposition stories. They show us how Jesus relentlessly confronts the religious authorities. Jesus is ramping it up. It starts in Mark 1:21 to 28. Now, Jesus and by this time he only has 4 disciples. They go to the synagogue on a normal Saturday, a Sabbath day. And Mark writes, "And they went into Capernaum, and immediately on the Sabbath he began to teach in the synagogue. And they were amazed at his teaching, because he was teaching them like one who had authority and not like the scribes." Well, if you were a scribe sitting there, wouldn't you be insulted? Well, they like to think of themselves as the experts, and well, they were too. I mean, they were Pharisees, but in addition, they had worked hard to learn all the law, memorize vast portions of it. Well, both the written law that we have in our Bibles and an oral tradition and commentaries. I mean, these people knew what they were talking about when it came to the law. But here, people are amazed at Jesus because he spoke with authority and he hadn't been trained at all. He was a carpenter, for goodness sake. Then, in Mark 1, It continues with verse 23. And so then there was a man in their synagogue with an unclean spirit. And he cried out, saying, Leave us alone, Jesus of Nazareth. Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. You have to kind of ask who he means by us. Perhaps everybody in the synagogue thought he meant that Jesus was coming to destroy the synagogue. But Jesus knew what he meant. Later on in this chapter, it says in Mark 1:34, And he healed many who were sick with various diseases and expelled many demons. He did not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. Note that. The demons knew Jesus. So, continuing back in verse 25, And Jesus rebuked him, saying, Be silent and come out of him. And after convulsing him and crying out with a loud voice, the unclean spirit came out of him. And they were all amazed, so they began to discuss with one another, saying, What is this? A new teaching with authority? He even commands the unclean spirits, and they obey him. And the report about him then went out everywhere in the whole surrounding region of Galilee. Note that too. The demons obeyed him. This knowledge of the demons, this was dangerous for Jesus. So he told him to shut up and come out of whoever it was that they were possessing. Seems like there was a lot of demons in Galilee. I don't understand that. But does Jesus stop? No. No, he doesn't. He ramps it up a notch. And the report about what he did and what he said to the demons and what the demons said went throughout the whole of Galilee. Everybody knew about it. Well, you know how word spreads, right? In the next chapter, we read about another day in Capernaum in Galilee, this time in the home of Peter and Andrew. Now, because, of course, everybody had heard about it, the house was full of people wanting to listen to Jesus and maybe to see some kind of sideshow, I guess. Well, people are like that, right? Miracles attract. Well, anyway, the house was full of people listening to Jesus teach. And when I say everybody, that includes those same Pharisees in Galilee. And those Pharisees, of course, are scribes, right? Not necessarily. I mean, there's Pharisees, and some of the Pharisees are scribes. But in front of them all, Jesus heals this paralyzed man, but that's not all he does. Listen to this, what Mark wrote in Mark 2. And when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, Child, your sins are forgiven. Now, some of the scribes were sitting there and reasoning in their hearts, Why does this man speak like this? He's blaspheming. Who is able to forgive sins except God alone? And immediately Jesus, perceiving in his spirit that they were reasoning like this within themselves, said to them, Why are you considering these things in your hearts? Which is easier, to say to the paralytic, Your sins are forgiven, or to say, Get up your stretcher and walk? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he said to the paralytic, I say to you, get up, pick up your stretcher, and go to your home. And he got up, and immediately picked up his stretcher, and went out in front of them all. So they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, Well, we have never seen anything like this. Suspicion of Jesus was growing. And now they were shocked by what he said. Those same scribes heard him claim authority to forgive sins. Not only did the demons identify him as the Holy One of God, he forgave sin as if he were God. Well, Jesus kept on confronting the Pharisees in Galilee in Mark 2:23-24. And it happened that he was going through the grain fields on the Sabbath. And his disciples began to make their way while plucking off the heads of grain. And the Pharisees began to say to him, "Behold, why are they doing what is not permitted on the Sabbath?" Did you see that word began? This was not a one-off confrontation, and they didn't just begin at this time. That word means they did this a lot. They were after him. The Pharisees were after Jesus. Then we see in Mark 3, 1-6, that the Pharisees sensed he was a threat. A threat not only to their status, but also to the nation, because he was a dangerous, popular teacher. Mark writes, "And he, Jesus, entered into the synagogue again, and a man who had a withered hand was there. And they, the Pharisees, were watching him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath, in order that they could accuse him. And he said to the man who had the withered hand, 'Come into the middle.'" Why did he say that? Well, Jesus wanted this to be a public rebuke to the Pharisees, and all those Pharisees were sitting around him. That's the way you sit in a synagogue. You sit around the speaker in there. The Pharisees were in the front row sitting around him. And he said to them, "Is it permitted on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil? To save life or to kill?" But they were silent. And looking around at them with anger, grieved at the hardness of their hearts, he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched it out, and his hand was restored. You notice Jesus didn't do anything? I think that's kind of cool. And the Pharisees went out immediately with the Herodians and began to conspire against him with regard to how they could destroy him. So there. By chapter 3, the Pharisees have made a decision. This powerful man, this Jesus, had to be executed. So they hatched a plan with their arch enemies, the Herodians. Who were those people? Well, Herod was the Roman ruler of Galilee, and the Herodians then were his followers, his collaborators. The Pharisees wanted Jesus' execution done not according to the law by stoning. That wasn't bad enough. They wanted his execution done in the Roman way, by crucifixion. They wanted to utterly discredit his claim to be a religious teacher or a prophet or whatever he's claimed to be. They wanted him gone and totally discredited by crucifixion. So, let the Roman Gentiles kill him. Great plan, huh? Well, they were right to be frightened by this Jesus. The people he was attracting were not only from Galilee. Mark 3, 7-8 says, where the rumors about Jesus had spread to. And Jesus went away with his disciples to the sea, and a great crowd from Galilee followed him. Okay. And from Judea, and from Jerusalem, and from Idumea, and the other side of the Jordan, and around Tyre and Sidon, a great crowd came to him because they heard all that he was doing. He was attracting Gentiles from Sidon. The Sidonians were the big enemy. This is what Jesus was doing. The people from Jerusalem then were mixing with the people that were supposed to hate the Gentiles. All because of this Jesus. You can kind of see their frustration, right? This theme of Mark is really building now. So now the reports about Jesus from Galilee had reached all the way up to Jerusalem. The leadership of Jerusalem had come up with a plan to discredit him. They think he's attracting the hated Gentiles, and if he was attracting the hated Gentiles, his power couldn't be from God, right? Based on your assumptions, your conclusions are often wrong, but that's what they concluded. I mean, the demons obeyed him, right? So where could his power be coming from? Well, that is explained in Mark 3:22. They decided, the scribes who had come down from Jerusalem were saying he's possessed by Beelzebub. By the ruler of demons he expels the demons. That's the conclusion they came up with. But who is Beelzebub? He was they're insulting him. This was an ancient god of the Canaanites. Now, of course, they mean Satan, right? Then in chapters 4 and 5, Mark describes more samples of Jesus' teaching in parables and explains why Jesus taught in parables that nobody could understand. And he also performed a spectacular miracle just for the disciples by stopping a storm. Mark is contrasting the adoring crowds with the deadly reaction from his hometown, even his own family. So chapters 4 and 5 really move this story along. But does Jesus tone it down to mollify them, even his own family? No, he ramps it up again. He turns to all those sitting around him and says, "This is my family," and he leaves his real family outside in the... Did I say real family? He leaves his biological family out there outside the house. He expands his family to all those who believe in him. And that didn't include his brothers. So Jesus' tactics culminate in feeding an army of 5,000 men out of a few loaves of bread and a couple of fish. And then he walks on the sea. And then he shows up on land when everybody knows that he hasn't taken a boat from the other side of the sea. And so as John reports, they said to him, "How did you get here?" So, now, in our text today, Mark has summed up the hysteria that surrounded Jesus. It's been building among the people. He describes them as running all over the place to be near him and to be healed just by touching his clothes. Mark depicts utter chaos swirling around Jesus and his disciples. And here's the part that really scared the Pharisees and the scribes. A lot of those people were expecting Jesus to turn that 5,000 men group into an army to rebel against Rome. That's what the local leaders feared he was up to. So now Jesus' popularity can no longer be ignored. Once again, the scribes and Pharisees traveled all the way down from Jerusalem to confront Jesus. So now I think we should be hearing the theme from the movie Jaws. Dum-dum, da-dum. So far, Mark has told us these things. The people say that Jesus spoke with more authority than the trained and esteemed scribes. The demons know who he is and obey him. Jesus forgives sin. Jesus constantly rebuked the leadership, and so they decide to kill him by Roman execution. So the authorities come down from Jerusalem. Now we see what the result will be. Mark 3:6 says, "The Pharisees went out immediately with the Herodians and began to conspire against him with regard to how they could destroy him." Jesus is ramping it up. The plot is twisting tighter and tighter around him. And we're only in chapter 6. There's 10 more chapters to go. Yeah, that opposition theme is escalating quickly. Well, of course, we and Mark's readers know how it will end. Wait a minute. There's something weird going on here. The people had faith in Jesus' clothes? What's up with that? His clothes could heal. There was a woman who touched his clothes, she was healed. And so all these people had heard about that apparently, and what? His clothes heal? You know, so far we don't see any belief in who Jesus is. The demons know who he is. Obviously they believe him and obey him, but nobody else seems to. Mark is keeping this a secret, and I think Jesus wanted to as well. He doesn't want anybody to know who he is. So what are people believing? What does Jesus mean when he says to the people, "Your faith has saved you"? Faith in what? And who do the religious leaders believe he is? And why does that make them want to kill him? That's weird stuff. I mean, even the disciples, when Jesus stilled the storm, asked, "Who then is this?" Yeah. Mark is keeping Jesus' identity a secret. If he keeps it a secret, though, how important does Mark think believing in who Jesus is important? How important is it to Mark to believe in who Jesus really is? I mean, is it enough to believe in his clothes? This is weird. And when you see something weird in the scriptures, that's kind of a clue that you need to look into it, because there's something going on here that you don't understand. And so I think we need to look into it, and in our next lesson, that's what we're going to do. We're going to stop a little bit about going through Mark, and we're going to stop and ask, what does Mark want people to believe in? This is kind of fun, isn't it? Well, it wasn't for Jesus. Maybe it was. It is kind of fun to put down the leadership, isn't it? Yeah. Weird stuff.